It started in 1989. At that time, it was called Hazardous Waste Management and Handling Rules. Then there were amendments, a series of amendments took place. Then it was amended in 2009, 2003. Then there was a thorough amendment again in 2008. And the term transboundary movement came into picture. Transboundary movement. Then a series of amendments. Now, here, let me talk about this movement. Transboundary movement is relevant to interstate, international, international movement. But let me tell you here one small thing. We always talk about, all the five projects we deliberated on used oil. Okay, used oil. Now, that is one hazardous waste. According to the hazardous waste rules, there are certain small issues which people are not aware, especially the industry side. I'm telling. Now, even today, even today. So now, let me tell you, when there is a hazardous waste, the hazardous waste cannot be transported from one state to another state without necessary permissions by the occupier as well as the, transporter or the disposal facility. So both have to obtain NOC and approvals. So if, let us say, one hospital, group housing or XYZ, they are sending their hazardous waste, any kind of hazardous waste, irrespective of term. It is termed as hazardous waste from UP to Uttarakhand or UP to Delhi or UP to Rajasthan or UP to Bihar. They have to, the project has to get NOC or authorization or approval or whatever term a documentation has to be obtained from the respective pollution control board or pollution control committee. At the same time, whosoever is taking, if it is a recycler or if it is a disposal facility, they have to also get one certification or one approval from UP Pollution Control Board. It can only be relaxed if there is a common order or common notice. If there is, suppose there is a common notice between UP and Delhi stating that Delhi is not having any facility, so UP will help us, and they said that okay, UP and Delhi both they can exchange their waste. Then in that case you don't require to have special these things, but special approvals. But if there is no such agreements or no such orders, in that case one has to get approvals irrespective of type and quantity of waste. So hazardous waste movement in between the states so far as on date is regulated this way. On the contrary, e-waste has no such regulations. E-waste can be transported to any city. Similarly, the battery waste is also it can be transported to any city without any special orders. Okay, so this is what I'm talking about, the prevailing rules. Now, the 2008 order was also, subsequently there were several amendments in 2009, 10, 11, 12. There were several orders, several amendments. Now, consequently, the current rule is hazardous and other waste management and transboundary movement rules 2016 came. Now it came in the form of GSR. GSR is always, I have told that general statutory rule, and GSR number 395E dated 4th April 2016, and it started, it became in force from the same very day. Now there are certain exceptions. Excuse me. There are certain exceptions. These are the exceptions: wastewater and exhaust gases, which are covered under the provisions of Water Act and Air Act, and the rules made thereunder and as amended from time to time. Then waste arising out of operation from ships, the shipping company ships beyond 5 kilometer, excuse me, beyond 5 kilometer of the relevant baseline as covered under their having the Shipping Act. So they are also not covered here. Then radioactive waste, then there is biomedical waste, then there is waste covered under SWM rules. In fact, waste covered under e-waste rules will also not come into this rule. Similarly, waste covered under battery waste also, that will also not come into this ruling. But scrap batteries fall into hazardous waste. Scrap batteries. Scrap battery means if a battery is damaged, then it will fall in hazardous category. But if a battery is in toto, if it is a complete battery, it is not working, that's a different thing. But if it is a complete battery, it is not damaged, then it will be a battery waste. I am telling as on date, because there is a battery management and handling rule, in process, which is going to come probably by next year. It should come out. So I'm talking about your role means an occupier's role. Occupier means, and all these projects, all these industries. Actually, this occupier term in earlier days, what was happening? MD or director was responsible. But if in our country there are so many multinational companies whose MDs and directors are sitting, probably somewhere in US, UK, or China, or maybe Japan, or any country. So in that case, they have given an authority to someone to be responsible on their behalf, and he or she is termed as occupier in this, as per these rules. So defined under section 20, under section 21, section 3, subsection 21, in relation to any factory or premises, means a person who has control over the affairs of the factory or the premises, and includes in relation to any hazardous and other wastes, the person in possession of the hazardous or other waste. So any person who is legally liable as per the you know company's board, the board of directors have given him or her the power. So he or she is the occupier. Now, what are the responsibilities? For the management of hazardous and other waste, the occupier shall have the following steps. One is prevention. Hazardous waste, there should be all and every efforts to, either you don't generate, you try to, don't, you should not generate. But, waste is something, it is a byproduct. So it is inevitable sometimes. So it is generated. Now, if it is generated, then let us try to minimize it. So that is another responsibility. Then the third is reuse. Use of hazardous waste and other waste for the purpose of original. You see, reuse is in terms of original use or other use. I was sharing the other day. Actually, I was sharing a definition of used oil, and in that, if you could see, there was a transformer oil also. Transformer oil. Transformer oil is generally, again, they sell it to somebody, and it is happening in a widely. It is sold without documentation. Okay, documentation only happens as in security gate pass and financial documents. That's all, not in terms of our environmental regulations. So that reuse, sometimes it is reutilized. So if it is reutilized without any modifications or any processing, reprocessing, that is only termed as, that way it is termed reuse. If it is recycled, then it will be a recycling process. Then recovery, utilization, including co-processing. Okay. Now recovery. Recovery, what happens? Suppose there is a waste, let us say ETP sludge. Okay. A small industry is there, which is having, let's say, small electroplating industry is there, and that electroplating industry is generating nickel or nickel sulfate, let's say. Okay, maybe in two forms of nickel sulfate will be different product, but the nickel is also there and sulfate is also there. Now, and there are so many other chemicals. Now, whether it is possible to to whether it is possible to take out nickel as well as sulfate from it. If it is possible, then it will be recovered. So that recovery is a method. That is one way. So there is a company, or there is some organization which is recovering heavy metals or precious metals from the sludge. That is one way. Another way, as I was showing a photograph and I was informing you that, if it is if chrome or hexavalent chrome is there in the wastewater, although wastewater is not falling into hazardous category, I mean hazardous waste category, but then wastewater is hazardous, and the recovery of hexavalent chromium from the wastewater is also a recovery. Okay, it is not going into sludge form, and before it is going into entering into ETP, it is actually recovered. That is also a recovery. At the same time, then you are talking about utilization. Utilization how? Co-processing. Now, co-processing is a term you must have heard about. Cement plants. Cement plants, generally cement plants, the kilns are run at around 1200 degrees Celsius. Now, if it is so, then at 1200 degrees Celsius, everything is burnt into cinders or maybe ash, and it is converted. Basically, clinker is very high energy intensive. So, what we do, the hazardous waste, if it is having a high calorific value, if it is having a high calorific value, then the hazardous waste, let's say paint booth sludge, paint booth. Suppose our bikes, cars, these are painted. These are painted in a process. There is a circular or a chain of components are moving, and there is a continuous spray is going on. First is primer, then paint is there. One coat, two coat, then there is a drying oven. So there is a paint process. In the paint process, we have a lot of hydrocarbon. So and in the paint sludge also there is a lot of, huge, it is high in calorific value. So those paint sludge should be separated, and even in some cases they do it like so that paint sludge can be straight away taken to cement plant, and thereby they can excuse me, they can reduce the energy consumption. So that is called co-processing. In that case, in fact, there is a very good document or guideline by the Central Pollution Control Board on co-processing. I'm quoting just one example, and which is related to hazardous waste. So co-processing is about that. You just take out the high calorific value to a cement kiln where it can be burnt, and there is no need of any kind of further incineration or anything. If it is incinerated, then what happens? There is a lot of toxins and the dioxins, furans. So that kind of air pollutants are there. But in case of this cement kiln, generally it is avoided. So it is burnt, and thereby you are getting two benefits. One is your waste volume is gone, hazardous waste volume is gone, and the second is the further disposal hassles are gone. At the same time, you have got energy. You are conserving some energy also. So co-processing. And if you review the Central Pollution Control Board's annual data, then in that case also you will find all these things. Co-processing, how much of hazardous waste is going for co-processing. And if it is nothing happening, then finally it will go for safe disposal. Safe disposal. So safe disposal means, there is a whole lot of, there is a specific engineering drawing, and you have to ensure that there is no percolation. If there is any kind of leakages, so there is a whole lot of lining given, concrete lining, whole lot of, and it needs a lot of space also. So that's safe disposal, and it is either stored for a number of years probably. So that is the way they store or dispose it in that way. Then again, safe and environmentally sound management of hazardous waste and other waste. Now, safe and environmentally sound management means, in that case, first of all, there should not be any kind of spillages. Let us say that we have got very good ETP. The ETP is fantastic. We have got a very good storage area also. Our storage is fantastic. We have got very good handling also at some point of time. But the people who are handling it, they are not following some kind of, they are not aware about certain things, and therefore, while in the process of handling, they are even some these any kind of waste, oil waste, or this plating waste or asbestos waste, they don't know, and there is a spillage when they are transporting from the sludge drying bed to the sludge storage area. Some kind of contamination is there. That small contamination will gradually lead to a higher pollution load. I mean, there will be a huge kind of pollution in the soil environment as well as the groundwater environment. That has to be that has to be checked. That has to be, and that checking can only be done through review. It's small thing. You have to just let them understand that. I mean, how you have to understand your workmen. That is a significant thing. I mean, the language they understand, you have to make them understand in their language only, and then that has to be reviewed every time, that there is no, I mean, they are following the whatever you have, your standard operating procedure. That is important. So the next one is hazardous and other waste generated in the establishment of an occupier. So the industry has to obtain one authorization, and the authorization has a specific process. Authorization, in the authorization, one has to share some information about the occupier, who is the company's name, the occupier's name, contact details, because it is subject to accident also. Hazardous waste is subject to. I mean, there is a possibility of accident in the process of transport, or maybe transboundary movement. So there is always a possibility of accident. So in the case of accident, who will be responsible? And there are documents, to trail. There are TREM. So those documents are there, and accident has to be reported in a specific format. If there will be any kind of accident, it has to be reported. So that authorization has to be obtained through an application, and nowadays it is online again. So a combined application can be filed. In that, one has to deliberate on what will be the quantity, and how it is going to be managed. Managed in the sense, if there is a used oil, what are the used oil, what will be the quantity, and how it has to be disposed of. Then what other wastes are there, how they are going to be, what will be the quantity, and how they are going to be disposed of. Now, you have to substantiate that all these disposal practices will be as per these agreements. So you have to submit the copies of agreements with different organizations, maybe the service providers, or the TSDF, the treatment, storage, and disposal facility provider. So those agreements are to be maintained, and those agreements are to be submitted. Then, this waste shall be transported from an occupier's establishment to an authorized actual user. If there is any actual user, then it has to be authorized. This actual user, as let us just go back to this one. If you see reuse, Reuse is an actual user, and recycling is an I mean, this can be one user, recovery can be one user, and co-processing can be one user. So any actual user, so then authorization has to be declared, that in the authorization it has to be, or if it is not declared in the authorization, at least the project has to declare in its application that how this has to be, who will be the user or who will be the possible user, and whether the possible user also having some kind of authorization, it has to be related. Okay, so that has to be declared. And disposal facility, I mean, the authorized actual user means the actual user should also have one authorization from the State Pollution Control Board or Pollution Control Committee of the Union Territory. So that authorization should be there. At the same time, the occupier's authorization should also be there. So both should be authorized by the Pollution Control Board or committee, and then only this movement can take place. Then the disposal facility, as I said, treatment, storage, and disposal facility, they need to have the authorization from the State Pollution Control Board, Central Pollution Control Board as well. And then only the things can be, the wastes can be disposed or sent to the respective parties. If you intend to get hazardous or and other wastes treated and disposed of by the operator of a treatment, storage, and disposal facility, you need to give the operator of that facility such specific information as may be needed for safe disposal. Now, what is this? You have to, when there is a TSDF, the treatment, storage, and disposal facility, you have got into an agreement. Now, after the agreement, they will charge you some amount, let us say 3 ton per 3 ton, minimum is 3 ton, then you have to pay minimum amount of this much, then per ton this much. Okay. Now, this is the way they charge as per distance, cover, and whatever, all those things, the charge you have agreed. Now, the clause, the rule says that you have to let them understand that what is the characteristic of this of the hazardous waste. Now, for that, it has to be characterized. Now, it has to be characterized in a couple of terms. One is whether it is toxic, so toxicity test. How is it reactive? Whether it is reactive to water, whether it is reactive to acid, whether it is reactive to alkali. So those things. Whether it is flammable, whether it is not flammable, whether it is having a calorific value, what is the calorific value, what kind of pH it is having, right? So those things has to be characterized. Then how much is the quantity, what is the concentration of, let's say, chromium here, hexavalent chromium here, trivalent chromium here, concentration of cyanide if there, concentration of lead, all these things are to be specified. If there is a if the ETP is from a bulk drug industry, then there will be a number of different other products, byproducts. So those things are to be deliberated in the test report. At the same time, generally in practice, practically what will happen, most of the TSDF provider, service provider, they take the sludge, they take the sample, they take the hazardous waste, and they give you, they actually test it on their own to get a confidence. They will charge you, it will be at the cost of at your cost, and they will find out a rapid test. Sometimes it is called a fingerprint analysis test, or they will also, they may also deliberate on a detailed test. So that test has to give that information, and that information will tell whether this waste is fit for reuse, recycle, or co-processing, or it has to go for the landfill or safe disposal landfill, or it may be incinerated also. You know what happens in incineration generally? The only objective is to reduce the volume of waste. It is incinerated, burnt, so that the volume of waste is reduced. And that burnt ash, that has to be stored. I mean, that is going to be a hazardous waste again. It has to be stored. But the worst part of incinerator is that it emits a lot of air pollutants and very heavy air pollutants. Therefore, it is always avoidable to have. I mean, you see, one small thing. If we talk about a simple bike, if you talk about a scooty, how much of problems you are having, you see, starting from the natural resources, how we are excavating our natural resources. Once the natural resources, I mean, it requires, let's say, metal, iron. So iron ore is there, we have to mine, and there is an impact. Then iron, once it is processed in the steel plant, you have to have ore to, steel production. In that process, you need to have coal, you need to have, there is a whole lot of emissions happening there. Then it is transported to various places. Then the metal is again giving some kind of shape. For that you need machineries. Then paint, plating, or for sweating. Okay. So those things are happening, and in the process you are getting so much of hazardous waste, or maybe air emission, water pollution, so much of things. So anyway, this is the way it has to happen. Now, the responsibilities take all the steps while managing hazardous and other wastes. Now, take all the steps means, one, it has to be, first of all, it has to be, I mean, at the beginning of the project, at the beginning of the, let's say that XYZ industry is coming, okay, in UP. They approached you and said that, you let me know, prepare a report for us. This will be our process. We are going to manufacture such and such thing, and you have to prepare a report for us, and that should give us an understanding on how should we deal with air pollution, water pollution, hazardous waste, and all legal requirements. So in that case, we have to talk about, they have to go for consent to establish. Once the consent to establish is, I mean, the things are completed. At the construction phase also, the construction and demolition wastes are there. I mean, that is also a part. Construction and demolition. If there is a demolition, it has to meet. If there is a construction, then construction and demolition wastes will be there. That has to be again met with. That has to be complied with. So from there, then you will come to, when it is in operation, then you have got all these things. So storage area you have to develop at the time of construction. Then once storage area is developed, then you have to go for authorization. Once the authorization is obtained, then it has to be characterized. Then all types of precautionary measures has to be taken, that the hazardous waste is not, suppose there is no spillage. Basically, it is not, when you are packing it, it has to be properly packed. There should be, it has to be labeled, and the labeling has to be done in a very fluorescent. There should be a fluorescent sticker on the label. Okay, and it should be clearly telling about what is the category, what is the what kind of hazardous waste it is. So there is a format for that sticker also. Okay, so these things are to be definitely followed. And you can have your own SOPs also, standard operating procedures, depending upon whatever the legal requirements, and your standard operating procedure should say that what best can be done. And when you are talking about audit, ISO 14000, or different audits like NABH or client audit, those kind of documents may also be checked, SOP. But if you talk about SPCB, State Pollution Control Board, or the Ministry of Environment, Forest and Climate Change, or CPCB, they may not go into that SOP. They may not go. They may go. If you are having an SOP, they find it very good, they may ask for a copy. But they generally get into those kind of details, right? It is actually looked after by the ISO 14000 lead auditors, and also this NABH kind of any kind of, or maybe the customer audits. So contain contaminants mean they should be packed properly, labeled properly. Prevent accidents. Prevent accidents. Suppose there is, if it is a highly flammable material, then it has to be contained in such a way that there should not be any leakage of the gas or sludge, and it is maybe, I mean, semi-liquid, liquid, or whatever. This has to also be, this has to be characterized, whether it is a semi-solid, whether it is a partial liquid, or it is a dry solid, or it is completely, it is just a kind of sludge kind of thing, liquid sludge kind of thing. So that kind of characteristic, it has to be declared. So preferably, actually, the most important thing is it should not be transported in liquid format. But then, if it is used oil, it is liquid. I mean, it is a liquid. If it is paint, thinner, it is a liquid. So there are certain things you cannot avoid them. So there should be a preventive measures for the accident in the storage, handling, and also the transportation, and limit their consequences on human being and environment. Human being, nobody should be affected. None of the human beings should be affected. At the same time, now, if it is, let's say, oil, okay, oily sludge, let's say, and there is a problem of some from the oily sludge, there is a problem of this black carbons, and this is getting stick with the people who are handling. In that case, preventive measures should be taken, that gloves are given to them. Suppose there is a thinner, let's say xylene is there, or chlorofluorocarbon, what is that, CCl4, chloroform is there. Chloroform, these things, if such type of chemicals are there in a drum, and I mean, of course, nobody is going to throw the chemical, effective chemical or usable chemical. But if it is an outdated chemical, it has to be thrown away, or maybe it has to be given to the safe disposal facility, or maybe co-processing. So when it is transported, and people should not inhale that, so that prevention has to be taken. And at the same time, there should not be any spillage, so that the environment is not affected. Environment has to say, especially solid, the soil environment, air environment, and water environment. All these three environments should be protected. Then the people who are working, they should have adequate knowledge about it, adequate knowledge about the impact of it. If they inhale, if something is happening, and somebody is, it is going to his face, or somewhere, if it is going in that way, that has to be avoided. How they should manage, how they should handle, what are the protective PPEs, basically personal protective equipment, they should use at the time of handling. That has to be deliberated. Then the equipment, if there is any equipment like, there could be some equipment if there is a sludge handling unit. So in that case, those equipment can be, mechanically the sludge is picked, dry sludge is picked and packed into a polypack or a drum kind of thing, and then there is a labeling. So if there is some kind of equipment being used, that has to be, that knowledge should be there to the user, who is using it, or who is operating it. Then all the information should be ensured, and most important thing is, this information should be displayed to the society also. The society should also know that what is the kind of hazardous waste being generated, handled, and disposed by the industry. Industry will not dispose; it will have to ensure the disposal service, right disposal by the right agencies. So that display of red board, actually it is called a red display board, Sometimes you'll get blackboard also. A blackboard is displayed on the main gate, maybe of a size of 5 by 4 or 3 feet by 4 feet, and the display board should be there. So that kind of display board should be on the main gate and also at the hazardous waste storage area. So this is basically, in the scope of an occupier actually. Now, what are the documentation to be maintained? Record of hazardous waste and other wastes, it has to be maintained in the form 3 on a monthly basis. Then prepare, annual returns. You have already seen some of the annual returns in PDF I had shared through screen sharing. Then it has to be, truly speaking, in today's scenario, I am having a lot of stress because of this particular exercise. Now the industries have started operating, and everybody has got a last date of 30th June. So we have asked for data to these people, and people are coming up with their own data. They're sharing the data, whatever they're having. If somebody is not having how to handle, so those things we are actually getting stuck with those things also. So I have to, and because of COVID, this lockdown, we are trying to work from different locations. So my team is also, I mean, I don't have a very large team, but then whosoever in the team also, they are, somebody is in, say, somebody is in some other place, somebody in some other place. So we are having a tough time actually in sharing data, getting it processed and reviewing it, and then finally getting it. We have completed 2, 3 Form 4s, but we have a lot of in pipeline. So we have to finish by 30th of June, and everything is going to be submitted to the state PCBs through email. Nowadays, only email is going because they have not created any kind of online system so far. So that is one way. You have to submit an annual return, which is actually going to be supplemented with the Form 10. Form 10 is the manifest. Now, this is HNO handover documents. Handover documents. There is a passbook, hazardous waste passbook, issued by the SPCB to the actual user. Now, let me tell you, this is a, I mean, if you try asking some of the industries in the surrounding area, you will find most of them are not having this. So this is one area where people are, I mean, there is a huge non-compliance, and PCBs don't say anything. I mean, probably, I don't know what is the thought behind it, but this is completely overlooked. Practically, it is not happening. But there should be a passbook so that it talks about, this is going like this much of waste is going like this. So that in one passbook, everything is recorded, everything is documented. And PCB also should have a glance at the passbook when they inspect. Then when there is a transportation of hazardous waste or disposal practice going on from the site, 7 copies of the manifest has to be prepared. And manifest is a transport document. It was earlier called as Form 13. Form 13 before 2016. Before 2016 notification, it was called as Form 13. Nowadays, it is called as Form 10. So this is what the documentations are. So broadly, I've given some outline. We will have some more deliberations, but then yes, let us talk about the storage. This storage is focused for occupiers, industries, projects, hospitals, group housing, anybody, hotels. Everybody has to have this 90 days theory unless and until there is some kind of general ruling by the state PCB or Union Territory Pollution Control Committee stating that they can store it for an extended period of such and such time. Earlier it was happening because when there were no TSDFs, in that case, the government was allowing them to store for 5 years. So, you have to create, the industry has to create a sludge storage of 5 years. That was also happening. But now it is, I mean, those rulings have gone. Now it has to be kept and disposed within 90 days from the date of generation. Then, yes, the SPCB may relax it to 180 days in these cases. You see, if there is a small generation up to 10 TPA of their annual capacity, so it can be extended up to 180 days. But there should be a written documentation. The SPCB, the industry or process, the industry or project should obtain this approval or authorization from the SPCB concerned or UTPCC concerned. Then the actual users, if there is an actual user or disposal facility, who can also probably having some. Now let me state something. Uh, Generally, the moment Diwali comes, after Diwali, we have a lot of hue and cry about air pollution, and air pollution specifically into the the NCR region, the National Capital Territory region. Now, in the NCR region, you have Ghaziabad, you have Sahibabad industrial area, Noida, Greater Noida, and your this Sonipat is there, Panipat is there, your this thing, Gurgaon is there, Manesar is there, Faridabad, Ballabgarh, all these areas are there. Now, all these areas are having some or other TSDF, and TSDF has to stop their incineration system. Therefore, they have to either go for co-processing. If they are not doing so, they have to choose co-processing, or they have to store their waste for a certain period of time. In two cases, it may happen. One, in case of the industry or the occupier, and two, in case of the disposal facility, the TSDF site. So both the cases, they should have an approval or an authorization from the state PCB or the Union Territory Pollution Control Committee, stating that they can store up to 180 days. Occupiers who do not have access to any treatment storage disposal facility in the concerned state. Now, for example, Delhi. In Delhi, it doesn't. They don't have any TSDF, so it may be applicable for Delhi. But then it has to be either a common notice by the DPCC, Delhi Pollution Control Committee, or it has to be individual. The waste which needs to be specifically stored for development of process for its recycling, recovery, processing, co-processing, or utilization. Suppose, there is a process whereby it takes uh, probably more than some time to store, to dry it, process it, or something. At that point of time, 190 days is not enough to process the waste for recycle, reuse, or whatever. In that case, also it has to be so. In this case, the user has to specify in their application and in their project report that this is going to happen like this. Therefore, the storage has to be increased from 90 days to 180 days. So in any other cases, if it is justifiable on some ground, let me tell you that we have sought similar approval from MPPCB for a hospital project in Indore, because they were having a very little, DG said used oil. They were not having any major source of hazardous waste, so they had to go for 180 days storage. So this kind of things keep on happening. So these are primarily, the basic things one has to understand. Packaging and labeling, every packet has to be labeled. You see, there is a number 2. If you see, the fluorescent yellow color label has to be there, and label shall not be, it should not. Let's say if it is transported and something, water is poured somehow, or it rained or something, some accidental way that it got washed. No, it should not be washable. It should be non-washable material, and weatherproof. It should be easily visible, and ensure that hazardous waste or other waste are packaged in a manner suitably safe hold for handling, storage, transport, and there is a guideline by the CPCB, and the labeling has to be as for Form 8. There is a format given for labeling, and this is the way it should be. So this is all for today. Okay.